Welcome back to the FutureWerx podcast. I'm your host, Scott McJunkin, and today we're diving into a fascinating and critical topic with wargaming expert Kevin Williamson. Kevin brings an impressive background to the table with experience in Army logistics, service as a gunner's mate in the Navy Reserves, and leadership roles in wargaming innovation, including his work with Matrix Pro Sims and Battle Road Digital. As the executive director of Near Peer Simulations, Kevin has been at the forefront of making wargaming accessible and leveraging it as a powerful tool for modern defense strategies. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so if we're talking about the topic of wargaming, let's start off by asking what is it and what is the purpose of it?
Sure. So the first part of your question on what is wargaming is going to, I'm just going to give an answer from my perspective because the wargaming community itself can't come up with a definition of what a wargame is. There's different arguments for what it should be, different models, I guess I should say, where they identify certain components that should be inside of again, can't really define what that should be in order to make it a war game. But that's largely driven by government requirements. So I'm just going to give you my perspective on how I see what wargaming is. And for me, it's just the methodology. It's no different than the scientific process or anything else that you would use in order to get data about a problem that you're exploring in order to try to solve that problem. And so an example would be on my drive this morning, I needed to go get gas. And so in its simplest form, deciding where to go get gas is wargaming because I could go somewhere closer that's more expensive, or I could go somewhere farther that's cheaper. And then I could go make that decision and then see, okay, well, does it actually save me money over the course of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? How does that actually work out? I know that's not really what people are thinking of when they think of wargaming, but a more I guess, practical example or something people would be used to is I have a bunch of cadets at West Point and they need to learn platoon level tactics. I might run a tactical level war game either in a digital simulation or on a tabletop game in order to show them, make your plan, put that plan into action through the vehicle of a war game, collect the data on what happened, and then let's have a discussion on why the doctrine says you should do it the way that we say you should do it. The important thing to note is that war games are not going to give you a correct answer. They serve as a vehicle to give you data. That way you can have informed discussions going forward. So just because something happened in a war game, most notably the ones that pop up in the news or CSIS or another organization doing something about the South China Sea, that's just data that they're collecting in order to have discussions on solutions to a problem.
Are these discussions that are happening around wargaming, are they difficult to have without wargaming taking place?
Not necessarily, because there's a culture where wargaming is still seen as just gaming or video games. So the reason it was such a big deal when the previous Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Berger, came out and emphasized wargaming reps and sets across all the Marines was wargamers knew that this was a valuable tool that Defense Department, can use. And it is used in, operational research positions or analysts, but there's not a dedicated, or there wasn't a dedicated culture surrounding wargaming at all levels. So enlisted to the officer corps.
We were talking about what are the discussions that take place around wargaming and how wargaming helps others have those discussions.
Yeah. Okay. So an example would be, right now the South China Sea is a good example, right? When it comes to the supply chain. Everybody knows Force Design 2030, or at least, sees it in the news. And there's a lot of good discussions surrounding what the force should look like going forward into the future. But one of the critical problems is how do we get the Marines onto those positions and how do we sustain them? And so wargaming is being used as a tool right now currently in order to look at that problem, which is, okay, how many ships do we need? Where do we need to base our global positioning networks? Where do we need to pre-position our stocks and sustain that over a long form campaign? That's something that's currently being worked on at the unclassified level. Another example would be at Marine Corps University, for example. When the captains go to expeditionary warfare school, they're using wargaming just to practice their company level tactics.
Okay, what is the difference? You mentioned earlier something about digital wargaming versus tabletop exercises. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, so tabletop wargaming, I'd say it's like the old school method or analog method. It's not meant in a derogatory term in any way. It's just tabletop kind of came around first. So you think about people standing around a board game rolling dice. Generally speaking, hex and counter games where you're looking at a board and there's hexes for the grid and you're only able to move your units a certain amount of spaces. That's typically what a traditional war game is. Digital wargaming, I would argue, has been around for a long time, but until it's been commercialized into the COTS software or commercial off the shelf, meaning it's commercially available. So if you wanted to go and buy a copy, you could. That's, to me, what spurred on the digital resurgence into wargaming. Mm-hmm. And the way that it's vastly different to me is it's not that digital is better than tabletop or tabletop's better than digital. It's a tool that you put in your toolbox to use. And what digital simulations allow you to do, even commercially available ones, is data extraction. So whatever happened in that scenario or whatever happened in that war game gets collected into a log that you can then look at afterwards and analyze, whereas traditional tabletop wargaming, you're relying on the facilitator to take notes. And that could range anywhere from, if I'm a facilitator at a schoolhouse, I not only need to be paying attention to what's happening in the war game, but I need to be paying attention to the discussions that the students are having, why they're coming to the conclusions that they're coming to. And that's something that's really hard to do just, writing down on a piece of paper for an after-action review.
Yeah, and the data that is extracted from each one of those tabletop exercises can vary depending on the facilitator, right? Maybe the personality, the time of day. It could be a lot of human factors into that. And so with the digital, it captures a robust amount of information. This is how I understand it. A robust amount of information that you can sift through, and it's pretty uniform and organized. Yeah,
it's also, to me, in some aspects, it can be more credible. So an example of that would be, I won't name any names, but just to give credibility to the example, at Marine Corps University, there's a capstone war game that happens every year, right? It uses a digital, or it did. There's different ways it's been done, but when I was there, we did a hybrid approach, which was overlaying a digital sim and just feeding the outputs into a tabletop game. But the example I'll give is when we just did it in the digital sim, everything that happened in that simulation was accurate in terms of munitions or ballistics because it's a 3D physics-based model, right? That's going to give you a more reliable answer on what a DF-26 does to a target. So a Chinese hypersonic, conventional, or nuclear-based ballistic missile, right? We can run it against a DDG or a land-based target and see, okay, well, we can either defend against it or not, and most likely not. But what then happens is for the non-kinetic stuff, so if we have special operations forces who might be doing something and there's no mechanic inside of the digital sim to say, hey, these soft guys are going to influence the local population to do something, right? What then happens is you have a bunch of people standing around a table who might be knowledgeable and might not be knowledgeable on that specific field, how that stuff's actually done at a classified level, because it all has to be spoken about at an unclassified level. They're going to have their own subjective opinions about whether or not the brief those students gave was accurate or not. Mm-hmm. And if you build, let's say, a tabletop game or even a digital war game specifically designed to satisfy that soft problem, right? Then it becomes less of a subjective thing, and then it's a binary thing, 1 or 0. And you could still have that subjective discussion afterwards, but it's not somebody who, they may be in for 15 years, but have they fought in the South China Sea? Probably not. So that's kind of an aspect where the digital sim can give you data to inform your discussion.
A lot of talk has been happening around the topic of AI and how it's being integrated into everything. How is AI, large language models, whatever you want to call it, how is this technology going to impact wargaming?
So a lot of ways, actually. So when ChatGPT first came out, I got really interested in it. And I'm going to give a couple of different use cases of how it's already been used. So when ChatGPT first came out, I was really interested in it, not necessarily for telling me how an engagement would work or anything classified. But for that data extraction, I'm not an analyst. I didn't go to college. I don't have a math degree. So I was curious if I could use the large language model to basically sift through the data, read it in like an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV format, and then tell me in a language that humans can understand, like, what does this actually mean? And I was, let's say, relatively successful, which at the time there was a token limit. There wasn't like a premium version. So I was limited in like what I could pull from the log into the language model. Well, then I met a gentleman called Michael Mern. I can't talk about what his platform's called, but he gave me access to an LLM that was specifically made for wargaming, but also primarily for intelligence wargaming. So there's a lot of intelligence stuff in there. It's specifically trained and fed from, Army publication documents. At the time, it was the only LLM that I had access to that would actually provide hyperlinks to the sources, which is another aspect of large language models, which is it's all good and well to use ChatGPT, but at the time, it didn't give you sources. So you didn't know if it was hallucinating, coming up with random information, or if it was accurate. And his gave me the sources, so I knew it was accurate. So what I then did was there's a problem in wargaming, even at military organizations, where somebody might be in charge of something that they know nothing about. The classic case is an infantry officer who's in charge of an air campaign. He doesn't know anything, well, maybe some do, but generally speaking, they're not going to know anything about an air campaign except for what it might do to them on the ground, right? I wanted to see, could I use a large language model that was credible and trusted to basically be like a next generation battle buddy, right? So I could have that infantry officer playing a scenario, asking a large language model, hey, these are my assets. These are my munitions and loadouts. These are my targets. What should I do? And so I tested that. I wrote a paper about it. It got published on PackSims. But essentially what I did was I took people I used Matrix Games Command Modern Operations software because there's a professional version that's used, at Marine Corps University and other places. I took commercial users who shouldn't know military doctrine. I took military officers of all different fields and branches, and then I took professional users of that software, had them all run the same scenario, then compared it against what the large language model told me to do. And then when you looked at the data, it didn't do better than the professional users, but it did achieve parity with the professional users. So you could pair that large language model up with somebody who doesn't even know anything about aircraft, conduct a very basic suppression of enemy air defense missions, and they're good to go. So for me, it was a way of trying to reduce friction in the learning process for students when they're wargaming. Instead of getting focused on, well, I don't know anything about this and getting frustrated, giving them a tool to be able to talk to it, kind of get some assistance and know what to do. That's a long-winded answer. I'm sorry. I kind of have
it's fascinating because what I'm hearing is you said reduce the friction is greater understanding of wargaming and tactics and a greater understanding of the battle space applied to a wider audience. And I mean, that can only improve the military, that can only improve our forces, but also there's the other question, maybe we shouldn't get into it, but also our enemies are doing the same thing as well.
Yeah.
And so we're getting smarter, but also they are. And so how do you war game that? But I want to talk about this nonprofit. I've never heard of a nonprofit for wargaming. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that and where you're going with that.
Yeah. So I'll start with my motivations because I think it's important to at least give a little background. So I got hired off the streets, essentially. I didn't have any experience, at least I thought, in wargaming. I don't have a degree. A company took a chance on me. And then even when I got to Marine Corps University, they flagged me because of my credit because I was homeless at the time. And they were like, he's a liability.
You were homeless?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Tim Barrick vouched for me. So shout out to Tim Barrick. He's a legend in the wargaming space. But he basically said, hey, Kevin's just trying to get back on his feet. He's good. We want to keep him. So I've kind of, that's why when you look at my background, it looks like I've done a lot, and it's not because I'm ego driven. I feel like I have to compete at a different level, but I also this is my passion. Right. And what I realized was, you know, I was a war gamer my whole life without realizing it. I didn't know it was a career field. Had I known it was a career field when I first got out of the military, I probably wouldn't have made all the choices I did. Right. And so I can't really remember what sparked it, but it was another, like, I go to these conferences and they talk about we need the next generation of young war gamers, and they're trying to come up with like esports to do it. And it's like, I have an Excel spreadsheet at home of 110 people, like over 110 people who have applied, you know, and their backgrounds range from people who have won hacking competitions to people who have taken nuclear science classes to people who are still in college, but they graduated high school early. I interface with people on online gaming communities who could probably do my job better than me, but they won't be given a chance because they don't know that it's a field, right? So you can't expect young people to, one, not know it's a job and magically show up. Two, when they do figure out it's a job, realize there's no degree for it. There's no pathway into it. You basically have to go get a degree for something completely unrelated, and then spend thousands of dollars to go get a certificate, which at that point is just a knowledge check because it's either a 3 or 5 day course. You know, so there's no like professional development for people. There's no teaching people, and all these people, and I don't want to speak out of place here because there are, like, I have amazing mentors. Like I just said, people that took chances on me. So there are people in the space, but the people in the space that are currently in these positions at these organizations that are talking about this being a problem, I don't see them going out and doing stuff for free. I don't, you know, specifically for me, when I was looking for professional development, even at Marine Corps University, my professional development was, let me come up with original ideas, let me write it down, put it into the ether, and then do stuff like this, you know, where people are like, oh, that's a great idea. So to me, as long as you're teachable, you can do this job. You just need a creative mind, because like 80% of it is just like, oh, that didn't work. Let me come up with something on the fly to, you know, make it work. And so I basically started this nonprofit like overnight, built the website, started a course, and it's just me and 2 other people. The 2 other people are also young people. So what I try to do is people that I know can already do the work, but can't get their foot in the door, I'll just bring them on as volunteers so they can attach their name to my name and do projects that I'm working on, you know, because like nobody's helping these people. And so I do the course all by myself. Everything's virtual. I record it on YouTube. They show up in Discord. I give optional assignments. It's an exposure course. I'm not going to teach them how to design a war game, but what I'm trying to do is show them that you can get paid for this. And if you're interested, at the end of the course, I have like 20 something mentors that are listed on the page. So like when people say, hey, I want to look for a job, I'm interested, this is my background, I try to find a mentor that has the same background. If they're a female, I try to pair them up with a female, only because there's not a lot of females in the defense space. And, you know, I always keep hearing like it's overwhelming is the reason why they don't go play. Because it's a room surrounded by men. They're usually military history buffs. Maybe they don't know anything about history, but they want to be a war gamer. You know, so I try to basically just help people and make them feel comfortable, you know, and it's worked out so far.
So you have taken that experience of someone believing in you, reaching out to you, you know, mentoring you, and seeing where that's taken your life in a positive direction, and you're giving other people that same chance.
Yeah, well, yeah, I try to. I wish I could hire people because, like, I could do some cool stuff if I just had, you know, the money. But yeah, that's basically what it is. It's just like I put myself in everybody's shoes now, so I don't get any sleep. My LinkedIn's always blowing up, but like, I'm sure there's people that are going to listen to this or watch this that can vouch for me that, you know, that I've helped them. So.
Oh, I believe it. And with your work with these young war gamers or people that are interested, and you've probably seen them progress as they work with you. Yeah. And your nonprofit. What do you see as like a trend or trajectory, like 5-10 years from now, in the area of wargaming? Where is this going to go? Where's the field of wargaming going to trend towards? In terms, well, that's kind of like a broad question, I guess. So, but whenever
I'm just thinking. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, I'm not trying to give you dead air. It's so I'll just talk about it in a couple aspects. So the first one is all the RFIs that I've seen are all talking about interconnected systems. And excuse me if I don't get the terminology correct. I'm not really a BD person, or a business development person. Sorry for the acronyms. But it's all digital stuff. And there are people who are anti-digital wargaming for various reasons, right? None of it's nefarious or, some cabal. It's just there's people that's anti-wargaming. And what's going to happen is all these young people who grow up with computer games, smartphones, like you see 5-year-olds with tablets, watching Blue's Clues, like they're glued to it. So they're going to understand how to work these systems just intuitively. My company is a great example, Battle Road Digital. They're all commercial game developers. So what ended up happening is Command PE from Matrix ProSims pretty much busted open the door for the Defense Department to be like, oh, digital wargaming isn't just Call of Duty and jokes, And so now what you have is a resurgence of all these people trying to create digital tools to get in the defense space. Our company are all commercial game developers. So what they do that's different than other ones, and I think you're going to see a trend towards this as well, which is they're used to making games that are easy to use. They're used to making games that are accessible, colorblind people, disabled people, whatever, market demographic is out there, they need to make the game accessible. And so everything in our system is a left click or a right click. There's systems like JDLM, which stands for Joint Deployment Logistics Model. It's from Boeing NAVSEA. It's a fantastic logistics tool, but it looks like it was from 1999, and it's too hard to use, and nobody really wants to use it. So for the sim side, it's going to start turning more towards digital tools just because the government wants that. And I don't think that contractor support 24/7 is going to be their answer long term. So they're going to want a tool that they can buy, don't have to don't have to hire an SME to be on site 24/7. They can just use it right out of the gate. So that's the first trend. The second trend is, I think as a cause and effect of that, they're going to need more younger people who know how to use these systems because they've been using them on the commercial side for forever. And then the third trend is with generative AI and large language models. There's a lot of crazy cool stuff that you can do. So,
I love the AI. The more I look into AI and more that we discuss this topic about wargaming, the more I realize everything that you say is absolutely going to come true. The frictionless experience that you're providing, but also the ease of use with the systems, and it's just going to become easier and easier.
Yeah.
If there's a young person out there watching right now that wants to get into wargaming, what advice would you give them? Of course, go and interact with you. But what is some other advice that you would give them?
Yeah, what I'd say is don't get too caught up on trying to learn the specifics, because I don't really know all the specifics myself. I probably get terms wrong and interchange them. Just be creative. So like anything could be a war game. So, chess is a war game. Checkers is a war game. And anything really is a war game. So if you have a sheet of paper, if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, that's a war game. It's just it's a war game with role-playing features, Just think of maybe what your favorite game is to play. And then the first step is modifying the rules, because you don't have to come up with the framework from the ground up. You've already got a game that you know how to play. So an example is Monopoly. Everybody pretty much knows how to play Monopoly. Just change some of the rules. Try to make it interesting. So instead of paying rent, maybe you get, create some cards that, maybe you've got a stock market edition. Maybe you want to have a buy and sell stock thing. And then what that can turn into is, once you get smarter on it, maybe you're super interested in economics, then you can start researching different forms of economics, capitalism, socialism, all that good stuff, and then change the rules to reflect that, and then see how that changes the player experience. My first advice would be modify rules to an existing game that you already like. And then at that point, you are a wargamer. You've designed a rule set for a war game. That's a valuable skill, but people don't think there's a lot of things that people have probably done for fun already that they can put on their resume and just don't understand how it transitions.
Excellent. Excellent. Kevin, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. I think this conversation has been both fascinating and enlightening for me and also for the viewers and listeners of this podcast. Any parting thoughts today before we go?
Yeah, if you're already a professional wargamer, find somebody and help them. Teach them, mentor them. I know I'm not the only one out here doing this, but I'm the only one at my nonprofit. So if you want to come help, reach out to me. Thank you to Threat Tech for providing this facility as well for our nonprofit. That's going to be something fun and really useful for us. We've already got people talking about, hey, I just moved there, so this is great. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Be sure to stay up to date with all things FutureWerx, and also visit FutureWerx.com. I'm your host, Scott McJunkin, and I'll see you next time.